Is my camera working? It seems there we go. That's better. Hi, everyone. I hope you've all had a great Friday and recovered from the workout on Wednesday. So, if you're here, that means you are ready to learn a bit more about nutrition and the best way that you can fuel yourself and fuel your performance. So, nutrition is important for everybody. It doesn't matter who you are, what sport you play, how old you are, what you put into your body has direct outcomes for how you feel, how you think, the energy you have, and just how you're going to go through your day. Now, while we're in this stressful lockdown time, athletes need accurate sports information that's going to teach them how to fuel themselves properly. And optimal nutrition is a really important part of any performance. An inadequate diet and a lack of fuel can limit your potential for maximum performance. So, if you're putting in all these hours on the pitch to become a better player, and you're weightlifting, and you're doing your cardio, and you're working on your skills, and you're learning your plays, all of that is great, but it's not going to matter because that's only going to get you to here. And when your capability is here, this gap, that's going to be filled by how you're fueling yourself and how you're feeding your body. And you've put in all this hard work to get yourself here. Doesn't it make sense to just put in that little bit of extra to watch what you eat and make sure you're giving yourself everything that you need to get yourself where you're able to be? So I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about nutrition basics for athletes, especially tips for how you can go about doing this in quarantine, and also just I'm going to dispel some myths around a lot of nutrition that kind of circulate the internet, because every now and again a new study comes out and it sort of says something, and then social media takes it and sensationalizes it, and all of a sudden it becomes completely distorted from what the study was actually saying. So I'll talk a little bit about those things as well. And if there'll be time for questions at the end, but if at any point something isn't clear or you feel like you have a question that's just come up, please feel free to write it in the chat, and I can answer it if I know the answer. So first of all, nutrition. Right. So the human body has to be supplied with enough energy to perform its many complex functions. But you can think of this in a pyramid. So at the base of the pyramid is the very basic things that your body needs to be able to fuel. Think growth, breathing, brain function, all your muscle and blood circulation. That's at the bottom. That's the stuff that your body needs to be able to fuel in order for you to live. And then above it is the next set of things. And then all the way at the top is less important things that your body, if you don't eat enough, your body will start to kind of deteriorate things. So for example, if you're not eating enough, a common symptom people have will be hair loss, because your body, it's not that important for your body to maintain its hair compared to your body maintaining breathing. So the human body has to be supplied with enough energy to perform its many complex functions. And within those functions, as an athlete, is your sport and your training and your competition. So as you put in 2 hours of exercise, 2 hours of training, as you add that in, your demand for energy also increases. So it's important to think about where you're actually getting energy from. So your body burns calories. That's what your body uses as its form of energy. Calories are not the same. So carbohydrates provide 4 calories per gram. So 1 gram of carbohydrates provides 4 calories. That's the same for protein. 1 gram of protein provides 4 calories, but 1 gram of fat provides 9 calories per gram. Now, a common misconception people have is, okay, so a piece of bread, that's a carbohydrate. It doesn't mean that if you're the amount of bread that you eat is 100 grams, it doesn't mean that you're eating 100 grams of carbohydrate, because within that piece of bread, it's going to have probably 4 to 5 grams of protein, maybe a gram of fat depending on what's in it, and about 20 to 22 grams of carbohydrate. So the food that you're eating, the grams that is, does not equate to the grams of actual carbohydrate, protein, and fat that you're eating. So as we continue to talk about this, down the line, when I create potential dietary plans for all of you, it's important to know that 100 grams of carbohydrate is not the same thing as 100 grams of bread. So the amount of calories that you need to consume is going to vary depending on your weight, your height, your metabolism, your gender, how fit you are, how much you exercise. There are so many different factors going into it, and that's why there's no one shoe fits everybody diet for athletes. You really have to listen to your body, and you have to learn what you need and what makes you perform the best you can. So it's a little bit of trial and error, but there are a few kind of set ideas that are tried and tested, and they're kind of foolproof, and they never hurt to apply them into your day-to-day life. So let's think about these 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. So these kind of are the big 3 components of our diet that we really, really need. Now there are micronutrients, which are all the vitamins and the minerals, and we get those things from our vegetables, from additives into food. We'll get to that, but for now I just want to focus on why do we have carbohydrates, why do we need fat, and why do we need protein? So carbohydrates are essential for energy. Now, energy is really important, not just for your activity, but just for day-to-day life. If you aren't eating enough carbohydrates, your brain is not going to be able to function, because what does your brain use to work? It uses glucose. So every single cell in your body needs energy, and that form of energy comes very readily in glucose. So you can think of a carbohydrate like a long string of all these different parts, complex, all tied together. When you eat a carbohydrate, it goes into your body and it's digested and it is broken down. The parts that it's broken down into, one of those parts is glucose. So you can think about it being complex and then separated. And that glucose can very quickly be transported around your body, broken down in your muscles, and used by your brain. So carbohydrates are super important for your brain, your energy levels, and of course, athletics. So as your energy usage increases, so when you're training more, your carbohydrate consumption should also increase. And it's really important that you kind of time your carbohydrate consumption around when you're exercising, so that your body doesn't start to break down your muscles for energy. Something that can happen is if you're not consuming enough calories and you're not eating enough carbohydrates, you're not eating enough fat, what can happen is your body starts to break down the muscle and use that for energy. Now you can imagine, as an athlete, that is less than desirable. You've worked so hard to put on this muscle that makes you stronger and faster and perform better, and then you're not eating right, and now your body's starting to break it down. And this is something that can especially happen in teenage boys with really fast metabolisms. So carbohydrate consumption is really important. Now, it's recommended that you should consume between 3 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of your body weight. So that can start to add up over the day. Now, a common misconception that people have is that timing is really, really important. So you might have heard that you have to eat protein after a workout and you have to eat carbs before a workout. Now, if you're a bodybuilder and you're trying to optimize physique and how you look, then yes, this is really, really important. But lots of new studies have shown that if you're eating consistent, balanced meals throughout the day, it doesn't actually make a difference when you consume your carbohydrates and when you consume your protein. However, if you are going into a 2-hour or 3-hour long training session, or you're going into a big day of games or a tournament, then yes, I would recommend consuming carbohydrates 30 minutes to an hour before you play, because that is just going to give you a nice energy boost. But now if you think about consuming 10 grams of carbohydrate per kilo and how quickly that can add up, it means that you need to eat regular balanced meals throughout the day. And so the best way to do that is to have a breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 2 snacks, all of which have a good amount of carbs, protein, and fat. And that way, if you have a carb source, a protein source, and a fat source, every time you have a meal or a snack, that way it's a really foolproof, simple way to make sure that you're getting all the nutrients that you need. So some examples of some really good healthy carbohydrate sources are fruit, especially for fast digested carbohydrates. There's simple carbohydrates and there's complex carbohydrates. If you need a little bit of a boost before a game or before practice, you want something that your body's going to be able to break down really easily. So that's a fruit, white bread, white rice, a sports drink, dried fruit. And then for long-term sustained energy throughout the day, you want to have complex carbohydrates. So that's things like oatmeal, whole grains, whole wheat bread, brown rice, sweet potato, anything like that. Those are all really, really good carbohydrate sources. So the next thing is protein. So protein is really, really important for athletes. You have one side, you have the carbohydrates that gives you energy, that fuels your body. Your body is then fueled to be able to exercise and work out and push yourself. But after you've done that, your muscles now have micro tears in them as they're going to start to rebuild and grow themselves back up. The way your muscles rebuild themselves is through using the protein that you consume, breaking them apart and using those building blocks to build your muscles back up bigger. If you're not consuming enough protein, then your muscles are just going to break down and there's nothing to build them back up. So this is why people suggest that the more exercise you do, the more protein you eat. Carbohydrates is still the number one thing if you're an athlete that requires a lot of endurance, like a soccer player. You're doing a lot of running, you need a lot of energy. Carbohydrates is the number one thing you need to look at. Then it's protein. If you are trying to build muscle or put on weight, then you have to think about your protein intake. Some really good protein sources are eggs, any meat, chicken, lamb, pork, dairy products like yogurt. Nuts can be a good source, but they're also high in fat. So if you are eating a lot of nuts, just be careful with that. And with your protein, you want to make sure that you are getting a little bit in after your workout if you're not sure that you're getting enough throughout the day. So if you know that you're eating eggs for breakfast, you're eating chicken at lunch, and you're going to eat chicken again at dinner and you feel like that's enough, then that's fine. A really good way to get enough protein after you've worked out is to drink something like chocolate milk. Chocolate milk is a great snack for athletes because it provides enough carbohydrates and enough protein after a workout. So it's a good way to build your muscles back up and prevent yourself from getting too tired. So those are little examples, little things to think about, how easy it is to make a difference. A lot of people are put off by nutrition because it can become really complicated. And there's so many opposing theories. Should I do this? Should I not do this? But when you take a look at what you actually need to be healthy and you break it down and you don't get overwhelmed, really simple changes can be enough to see a difference. So you want to make sure that you really are eating enough and fueling your body and getting enough of everything you need. That also means that sometimes people forget how important fat is. So you'll see a lot of products nowadays have low fat, no fat, 0% fat, because a while ago it was sensationalized that eating a diet high in fat was very unhealthy for you. Now, this is actually only true for about 15% of the population. that has a specific gene that tells their body to produce a lot of cholesterol. And so that happens, and then they eat a lot of fat, and then they can get sick. But for most of the population, you need a healthy amount of fat, and eating fat in your diet is not going to make you sick. There are different kinds of fats. Some healthy kinds, healthy sources are fish, peanut butter, nuts, olive oil, avocado. All of those are really great sources of fat, and fat is important for long-term energy storage and immunity. So if you think about what happens when you work out, you're putting your body under so much stress, your muscles are getting damaged, there's tons of the stress hormone cortisol pumping through your body. You're putting your body under a lot of stress, and that can deplete your immune system. So if you're not getting enough fat, if you find that you're someone that gets sick very often and you're training a lot, this could be because you're not eating enough fat in your diet. So when I do send out nutrition information and details about how to work out, how much fat, protein, and carbohydrates you should be eating, make sure you take a look, and it can be a really great resource to just write down everything you eat in a day and then search, okay, how many grams of carbohydrate are in this apple? And then write it down and then add up all your totals, and you can see, okay, today I consumed 200 grams of carbohydrate, 100 grams of protein. Oh, but only 20 grams of fat. That's not enough. And it's a really simple way of tracking and making sure that you're getting enough of what you need so that you're not going to make yourself sick, especially if you're not getting enough fat. So I think that another thing with nutrition is that it can be really easy to worry a lot about getting it perfect. I know that when I was given my suggestions for what I should be consuming in a day, you want to hit it every single time, and that can be really mentally stressful. And so I just wanted to say that progress in this case is a lot better than perfection. You don't need to hit the numbers perfectly every time. You can be within 10 to 20 grams and still see a lot of progress in how you're feeling. It's just really important that you're conscious of what you're putting in your body and making sure that you're getting enough of everything. So that leads me to quarantine. So while we're all here and stuck in our houses and in our spaces, and we might not be going to school or going outside or training with our teams, two things can happen. One, we might be bored, so we end up eating a lot more than we should. Two, we might not be exercising as much, which means we're not hungry, which means we're eating a lot less. So it can kind of go both ways, and you just want to make sure that you're eating exactly the right amount that you need to eat, because you don't want to be in the position where, you're not doing any activity, you're not going outside, you're bored, you find yourself mindlessly snacking all day. You keep going into the kitchen, you open the fridge, you see what's there, you close the fridge, you go back out, you come back into the kitchen, and you're constantly looking for something to eat. A good way to avoid doing that is making sure your meals are balanced with protein, carbohydrate, and fat, and that way you'll be much more satisfied. If you are really just kind of eating whatever you want and not having a balance of those 3 macronutrients, that's when you'll find yourself, you kind of feel like something salty, you kind of want a chocolate bar, you kind of want a snack. Instead, focus on having 3 really balanced meals and 1 or 2 snacks, and that can be a good way of making sure you're not eating too much. The other thing that can happen, I know I struggled with this, is I wasn't nearly as active now as I am when I'm back at college and training with my team and going to class. So my hunger levels just completely dropped, not really hungry, maybe eating 1 or 2 meals a day, and then I start to lose weight. But the weight that I'm losing is muscle. And so that means I'm going to be a lot weaker when I go back and train with my team. And that's not what I want, because I've worked really hard to get to where I am now. So if this is something that's happening with you, a good way to avoid this is to make sure that you're getting enough protein. It's okay if you're eating a bit less because you are probably less active. So that makes sense. If this is how much you're burning, how much exercise you're doing, and this is how much you're eating, you're going to gain weight. If this is how much you're burning and this is how much you're not eating, so it's below, you're going to lose weight. So you want to be around here. You want it to be balanced. You don't want to be constantly yo-yoing up and down. So in order to make sure since your energy levels have dropped, what you need has dropped, it's okay to eat less, but make sure you're getting enough protein in. And even though you're not exercising, you're not lifting as much as you were before, you can still prevent your muscle from being broken down, because that's only going to happen if you're not getting enough protein. So those are some things to think about for quarantine, and also just keeping your immune system up. The best way to do that is to get balanced macronutrients and making sure you're eating enough fruit and vegetables, as I'm sure your parents have told you before. So those are kind of some basic things to think about. And I'm happy to go into more detail about anything, but does anyone have any specific questions or things that they might have heard about nutrition and diets for athletes that they want to check if they're true? So you can just comment. I'll just wait maybe a minute or two and see if anyone has anything. All right. Are protein shakes recommended for soccer players? Right, so this is a great question. And I personally really like protein shakes because they're a good, quick way to make sure that you're getting enough protein, but they are by no means necessary. So it's not like if you're not having a protein shake every day, you're not going to be performing well. It is very much possible to get enough protein that you need from your diet without adding in protein shakes. But if you're someone that struggles, like maybe you don't want to eat breakfast, or you can't get enough protein throughout the day, then having a protein shake is a great way to make sure that you're hitting your daily requirement. For me, I find that they're really helpful because I don't like to eat breakfast. But then breakfast gone is a whole meal where I should be getting about 20 grams of protein in. So another reason why you might want a protein shake is if you are trying to put on weight and you're trying to put on muscle mass, then it can be really hard to up your protein intake more. In that situation, I would recommend a protein shake. But also supplements are expensive. Buying a tub of protein powder that's only got 30 servings in it is a lot more expensive than, eating chicken, eating eggs, drinking milk, getting your protein that way. So it's there are pros and cons, but it's not necessary, but it can be helpful. And yes, to answer the next question, they are a good way of getting more protein. For game days, how many hours before games should you normally eat? So this is, again, personal. Some people need to eat much longer before the game because they can get cramps and they don't feel well. But I would recommend you want to eat a good meal in the morning 4 hours or so, 4 to 5 hours before the game. This can be hard if you have a morning game, understandably, but if it's an afternoon game, you want to have a big breakfast with your protein, your carbs, and your fat. Then you want to let it digest, and then an hour to 45 minutes before the game, then you want to have something very high in carbohydrates that are easy to digest. So a banana, an apple, some energy drink, that's what you want to do. But in the morning, you want to have a good balanced breakfast, but I would say 4 hours before or so, if that makes sense. Immediate energy, short-term energy, and long-term energy concerning nutrition. Is there specific stuff we must eat to eat the correct energy system? So I think what you're asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are two energy systems, your short term and your long term, and are there ways that you should eat to access both systems? Um, so not really, no. There's a lot of people, there's a misconception that because fat is your long term energy storage, that if you don't eat anything that is in your short term energy storage, you'll start to burn fat. But this is actually a misconception. It's not true at all. The only way to burn fat is to be in a calorie deficit. So it's just important to have a balance of both kinds of sugars because you want something that's going to give you immediate energy as an athlete. You don't want to be tired and slow when you go to practice, but then that gets burned up really quickly. So if I have an apple 30 minutes before practice, that's going to be burned up within the first 20 if I'm working hard. But what that allows my body to do is use up that energy, and then it gives my body time to start burning the complex carbs that I've consumed throughout the day. So you can't go a whole day without eating, eat an apple, and think you're going to have enough energy at practice. At practice, your body's also going to burn those oats or that bread that you ate for breakfast, that rice that you had at lunch, and that apple. It's just going to start with that apple, and that also gives your body time to then start burning what you've stored throughout the day. It just takes a bit of a longer time, if that makes sense. Is it okay to eat a full breakfast, then skip lunch, then have a heavy dinner? That's personal preference. It depends what your goals are. So if you're trying to, that can be a bit rocky if you're trying to lose weight, because people will eat a big breakfast, not eat anything throughout the day, get really hungry, and then eat a huge dinner and overeat, which means then they're eating excess calories, and then that gets stored as fat. So then they start to put on weight. Another problem with that is that eating a big meal before bed means you lie down straight away and your food isn't getting digested properly, so it's not getting stored the right way. It also depends when you're practicing. I would recommend for athletes you want to eat more consistently because, again, you want food that's going to be able to be broken down. If you eat breakfasts, I don't know, say 7 or 8 a.m., then you're practicing at 3 p.m. That's a really long time to go. By then, your food has already mostly been broken down, and that's a really long time to go without giving your body something to practice. Start with something small and then build up, and then maybe by then you'll be able to make a big lunch. But I know it can be hard with time commitments to eat lunch. I know, like, my younger brother just likes to go and play soccer. He doesn't want to eat lunch. But if you're really trying to fuel your performance, you want to eat more meals throughout the day. A lot of people say cold water during a workout isn't recommended. Is it true? And if it is, what's the reason? So people think that this is the case because cold water, for your body to use water to hydrate your cells, it has to be at your body temperature, which is about 36 to 37 degrees. When you're drinking cold water, obviously it's not 36 to 37 degrees. Your body uses energy to heat it up and bring it up to the level that it can use to then hydrate your cells and do all the things that water needs to do in your body. So people recommend not drinking cold water during a workout because it's going to take longer to hydrate you because it needs to be heated up first. Now, I haven't seen much research about this, and I would always say that drinking cold water is better than drinking no water at all during a workout. So I'm not 100% sure on whether that's backed up by science, but I would always say if you prefer to drink cold water, that's fine. I don't think that it's going to have any negative effects on your workout. What food is recommended to eat a match day or training day? That's a good question. It can be a struggle for a lot of athletes to find food that they can manage to eat on a match day. It's hard. You have nerves, your stomach feels a bit unsettled, you have butterflies, and you don't want to eat something that's going to make you feel heavy and weighed down, but you also want to eat enough to have energy. So another thing I always recommend to people is you need to take the time to find what works with you and then stick to it. You don't want to eat the same thing every day and then all of a sudden be like, oh, it's a match day, I'm going to have pancakes today, but you don't usually eat pancakes. Then you don't know how that's going to work for you and your energy might end up plummeting. So on match day, I recommend in the morning having a source of protein, so 1 or 2 eggs, a glass of milk, a piece of ham, something like that, a source of protein, just so that it's going to be there ready for your muscles to use when they start to break down. And then several servings of carbohydrates, but both kinds. So you want simple and complex. So what I like to eat on my match day is a boiled egg for protein and a glass of milk so that that gets stored in my muscles and ready for them to use when they need it. And then I have oatmeal, which is a complex carbohydrate. So that's going to take a long time to be released as glucose for my muscles to use. And then on top, banana, which is simple, and that gets broken down much faster. And then later, closer to the match, I have a banana as well, because again, that gets broken down very quickly. So you don't need to have much fat on game day. The night before and the day of game day, if you eat bacon, foods really high in fat, you're going to find that slows you down and makes you feel heavy because fat takes a really long time to digest. And so that can sit in your stomach and make you feel uncomfortable and not great. So the night before a match and on match day, I would say a tiny bit of healthy fats, so maybe like peanut butter, but no major bacon or very fat heavy foods because that's what's going to really weigh you down. So you want complex carbs, whole wheat toast with jam, great example because that's got your complex and your simple sugars. Other examples would be anything that you can have. A piece of fruit is always a go-to for me for simple sugars. And then a glass of milk, that gives you simple sugars and protein. So if you don't have lactose intolerance, milk is a great source of energy and protein on your match days and training days. And I saw a comment earlier as well that says athletes have different types of energy that they need. So relating that to before, it is going to depend what kind of athlete you are. Now, I think most of you here are soccer players, so you're considered endurance athletes. You're running for a long time, which means you need really, really good sources of slow releasing energy. So something that's really important is consistency. You can't think that eating carbs on game day is enough to give you energy to perform for 70 to 90 minutes. It's not. Prepping for your match day starts a week before the match. This is something that my athletic trainer always tells us. You can't eat whatever you want during the week and think, okay, match is on Saturday, I'm ready. Saturday, I'm going to eat healthy whole wheat toast, a piece of fruit, grilled chicken, I'm going to be great. But then the whole week you've eaten French fries, which are high in fat, no complex carbohydrate sources, and not enough protein. Your body is not going to be ready to perform on Saturday. So nutrition is really about consistency. And I don't mean consistency with perfection. I mean throughout the week, you're getting enough complex carbohydrates every day, enough protein every day, enough fruit and vegetables every day. And that's the way that you're going to perform as best as you can on Saturday. And then Sunday, reward yourself. Take it easy. Saturday night for dinner, have a pizza or whatever it is that you like, and that's totally fine. But you have to start thinking a week before your game if you really want to make and see a difference. But these are all really great questions. So is there anything else? The question about water was really good, though. Hydration is super, super important. And a myth that is quite common is that water is the best for hydration. Usually, yes, I would say, water is always better to drink than a Coke or orange juice or anything. But while you're playing sport, especially if it's hot, you're not just sweating out water, you're sweating out electrolytes, which are different salts that are used in your body, like sodium and magnesium. And they're really important. And once you sweat them out, you have to replace them. And this is why, if you are having a really heavy training session in the sun or playing a game, I would recommend finding something with electrolytes in it. I'd be wary of Gatorades and Energiades and things like that unless you need the extra sugar. That can be a great energy boost, super fast digesting, gets to your muscles quick. That can be helpful, but you can also find a lot of electrolyte powders that you just add to your water, and those can be great. Coconut water is also a good example. It has electrolytes. Just making sure that after a big training session, you're not just replacing water that's lost, you're replacing the salts as well. Yeah, wow, that's a great question. Recovery is super, super important. Um, and something that a lot of athletes forget is you can kind of take for granted what you put your body through in big training sessions because you get so used to it. Oh, you weightlift 5 times a week, or you have 6 days a week of training, you have a big game on Saturday. You're doing so much and you've probably been doing it for years. And while it's hard, it also becomes your daily norm. And what that means is you can sometimes forget that even though it's normal for you now, it is still strenuous on your body. And that's what I mentioned before. A lot of athletes get the flu really easily because they don't actually fuel their body to be healthy enough to cope with the demands of their training. So recovery is really, really important, especially in big seasons where you're playing a game or two every week. You need to recover. And so that kind of comes in two parts. That means listening to your coaches with their training programs and their workouts and not doing more than they tell you to. Right after you finished a game, it's not a great idea to go for a run after or go weightlift the next day because your body needs to recover. And there is this idea with athletes and any high achieving sportswomen or sportsmen that if you are not constantly tired, constantly sore, constantly pushing yourself, that there's someone else that's working harder than you. But I guarantee it is much more impressive and it is much more useful to you as an athlete if you are pushing yourself and making yourself tired, but then resting and fueling yourself when you need to. And that way you will always be able to perform and you won't be getting sick and you won't be getting injured. My first year at college playing rugby, my training program was increased a lot from high school. And I wasn't eating enough carbohydrates. I just wasn't. I didn't want to put on any weight. I was nervous. But then what happened was I kept getting injured. And I couldn't figure out why I kept getting injured. And eventually, I went and spoke to my coach, and we worked out that it was because I wasn't eating enough carbohydrates. And that's just one example of how if you're not fueling your body properly, your body's going to let you down because you're letting it down. So, recovery. After a game, or a strenuous training session, you need to make sure you're getting enough protein. Protein shake, chocolate milk, grilled chicken, lentils, beans, anything like that with high levels of protein is super, super important because you've started, as I said before, to create little tears in your muscle and you want to build that back up. Otherwise, if you haven't given your body anything to build back up with, you're going to go back to training on Monday and you're going to hurt yourself because your body's not ready to perform. Then you also need carbohydrates. You've just played maybe a 90-minute soccer game, gone into overtime, you've been running the entire time, you're exhausted, your energy levels are depleted. You have burnt up all the simple sugars and all the complex sugars in your body, and that means that you have nothing to use for energy. So in order to get your muscles back up to where they can perform, you need to give them the glycogen. Glycogen is what's stored in your muscles for energy. You need to give them the glycogen so that you can perform again. So again, it's the same thing. You want to give yourself some carbohydrates and you want to give yourself some protein. And that's why chocolate milk is great, because it'll give you both. Right after a game or a hard training session, you want to get something in you within 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be a huge meal, but you want to give yourself something just so that your body doesn't start breaking itself down if you've worked it really hard. So that's why if you're going to go to a game, pack something with you, take it in your bag so that you have it to eat almost as soon as you're done. And if it's not like protein and carbs, that's okay. Just give yourself something, an apple, chocolate milk, a granola bar, to hold yourself over until your next meal. And then your next meal after your training session is almost more important than the one you had before. That's where you want to make sure you hit your protein, you hit your carbs, and you get enough fat, because that's what's going to get stored as your long-term energy again. So hopefully that answers that question. Again, it's all about balance, and I will be making some resources. There are some calculations that you can do, really simple ones, to work out based on your weight and your height and your activity level, how much protein, carbohydrates, and fat you should be getting in your diet. And it can be really eye-opening to see what you've been missing out on. And you'll be surprised how quickly you learn and how quickly you see how much better you can make your body feel by eating the right things. So let's see, we covered hydration, exercise recovery. Anything else? Any more questions? Great question. Does being vegan or vegetarian have more health benefits for athletes than a normal diet? So no research has shown that veganism or vegetarianism has more health benefits for athletes, point blank. For athletes, it can be really hard to get enough protein if they're vegetarian or vegan. So now, if you are vegetarian or vegan, or you're thinking about going vegetarian or vegan, I really recommend doing some careful research, because you're taking a huge food source out of your diet and you need to make sure you're replacing it, because it's not just protein that's getting taken out, it's all other kinds of vitamins like vitamin B that are really important for your body. So it can be really hard for athletes to get enough protein. Now, that's not impossible. Nuts, nut butters, seeds, chickpeas, beans, lentils, those are all great sources of vegetarian protein. But you need to eat a lot more chickpeas than you do chicken to reach the same levels of protein. So it can be hard to get the amount of protein you need, and that's where vegan or vegetarian protein powders can come in handy. The problem is vegan and vegetarian diets can often be very expensive, and so they're not accessible for people. Then there comes the whole host of other potential health effects. So some studies have shown that veganism and vegetarianism reduce your chances of cancer and heart disease by a lot. Now, in my understanding of the research, those changes only occur if beforehand you weren't eating a balanced diet. So that's people who drink a ton of alcohol, smoke, and aren't eating a healthy, balanced diet filled with vegetables and fruit, and eating only red meat, for example. So if you're eating a healthy, balanced diet and you're not overeating any one food group, then veganism and vegetarianism aren't going to be that much more healthy for you unless they make you feel better, in which case then it's a personal preference. And tons of athletes have seen performance improvements going on it, but I would say that with the amount of research that you have to do, it isn't sustainable for everyone. So there's a lot of supplements that you'll have to take: vitamin D, vitamin B12, calcium, if you do go vegan or vegetarian as an athlete, because you can do a lot of harm to your body if you're not prepared beforehand. But that's a really good question. I just encourage anyone who's thinking about it to do research beforehand, and I can put a section in the materials that I'm going to make about it. But we have evolved to eat protein, carbohydrates, and fat, and so eating grilled chicken and eating eggs and drinking milk, those things are not bad for our body if you're eating them in moderation. So, good question. Another reason why some athletes see benefits with being vegan or vegetarian is because when they go on those diets, they start to eat a lot more carbohydrates. Because when you replace a meat source with beans like chickpeas or lentils or any kind of bean, they have protein, but they're also a source of carbohydrate. And so in order for these athletes to get enough protein, inherently they're actually eating a lot more carbohydrates. And so that again just links back to what I was saying before. Chances are you're not eating enough carbohydrates, or you're eating too many. So that's why it can be great to make sure that you're eating the right amount. Anything else? Okay, so as I said, I'm going to be making some materials which will hopefully be lagging a little, which will hopefully be able to be sent out to all of you soon. And I really encourage you to use the materials. This is a great time. It's remote learning. We're not really at school. You're not training with your team, but that doesn't mean that you can't put the time and energy into your athletic performance now. Just because you're not at soccer practice doesn't mean you can't still think like an athlete and treat yourself as an athlete. And so I encourage you to look at the resources. I will let you know when they're up, and figure out how much of each macronutrient you need and see if you're actually getting the right amount. You have nothing to lose from improving your nutrition. There's only things to be gained from eating a more balanced, healthy diet. And I promise that if you stick with it, you will see improvements in your performance. It doesn't have to be complicated. And success as an athlete is really just an accumulation of consistency day in, day out with your training, with your nutrition, with your hydration, and with your focus. So please feel free to send any more questions as well into the group chat. I'm happy to answer them at any point. I think that I've learned so much about nutrition, and I've really seen the effects on my performance, and I want everyone to get the same benefits. So please, if you think of any more questions, let me know. Otherwise, look at the materials when they're created, and I will probably have another talk in the next few weeks where you can look at the materials, and we'll go on live stream, and I'll talk you through how to do the calculations, and I'll talk you through how to think about creating a diet plan that works for you, because there's no one size that fits all. So if there aren't any more questions, then I think that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you learned something new, and have some information to take away and think about. Have a great weekend and look out for our Instagram challenge coming out. It'll be a fun little competition for you all to work through together. And other than that, have a great weekend. Thank you so much for all your questions. They were great, and it's good to see so much engagement with the information. So please, if you think of anything at any time, feel free to just put a message in the group chat or wait till our next chat on Friday. Awesome.